Hi. We would like to take a moment before we proceed to acknowledge the gratitude we have towards the many indigenous nations who call this valley their homeland. Many thanks to the Blackfeet Crow, Shoshone, and others who have lived here since time immemorial and protected the waters, land, air, and animals. May we proceed with the spirit of respect and generosity that these nations have displayed. Good evening. I am Julia Shada, the chair of the Gallatin County Democratic Central Committee, otherwise known as the Gallatin Democrats. We are the local Democrats, and we are devoted to raising awareness and participation in our local elections. Great power resides in our state legislature, and people do not know this. Decisions are made in county government that shape the quality, the texture, the tenor of our lives. The Gallatin Democrats' motto is to vote from the bottom of the ballot up. Our headliner tonight is a forum for the 3 outstanding candidates running for federal office to represent us in the newly formed Montana 1 Congressional District. Our opener will be an introduction of our state and county candidates and a short panel on how critical their races are. I have asked each candidate to give us a vision statement, to answer, in short, why they are running. But before we begin, please turn to a neighbor and tell them why you are here tonight. What are you concerned about in your community? Even if you have to shout across a distance, please. Thank you. And now our county and state candidates.
Hi, my name is Audrey Cromwell, and I'm running for Gallatin County Attorney. I'm running for this position because we can do better. I'm running because we need updated criminal justice policies. We need a fresh approach to leadership, and we need strategies to address our mental health crisis in our county. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Bjorn Boyer. I'm also running for county attorney. I'm a proven prosecutor, having worked in the county attorney's office for 7.5 years, and I have fresh ideas to move the county attorney's office forward to reduce recidivism. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Boyer, and I'm running for Gallatin County Commission. I seek to preserve the Gallatin County we know and love, and promote friendly, caring communities, opportunity for all, and inspiring, healthy, productive landscapes.
Hello, I'm here on behalf of Representative Ed Staffman of House District 62. And Ed is advocating for more solutions and less divisiveness. As the only freshman to be elected to chair a major committee on a bipartisan vote, Ed will focus on bringing folks together on those issues that matter to everyday Montanans, such as affordable housing, healthcare, and childcare, quality public education, climate, and creating a more just society.
Hi, my name is Katie Firethunder. I am a student at MSU, but I also work for Representative Alice Buckley as her policy director and treasurer. Unfortunately, Alice can't be with us today as she has COVID, but I am happy to be here to represent and share her vision statement on behalf of our campaign for House District 63. We believe in creating a future in Bozeman that works for all of us, where we have access to housing, childcare, jobs that pay a living wage, along with healthcare that it covers not only physical but mental needs. It's our vision for a livable Bozeman that we hold close to our campaign and what Alice will center as she goes to represent us in the next legislative session. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alana Griffith, and I'm running for House District 64, which runs from Four Corners all the way to West Yellowstone. Just as I have done for my clients in my legal career, I am running so that I can craft common sense solutions to the issues like affordable housing and public access, and to use my legal experience to advocate for their passage in Helena. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Allison. I am here on behalf of Representative Kelly Cordham, who unfortunately lost a friend this week and can't be with us tonight. But he did ask me to read his statement. His vision is that money is not speech, corporations are not people, and all Montanans deserve a voice in their government. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Eric Matthews. I am your almost representative-elect for House District 66. We are in House District 66 right now, so welcome. My vision statement, we deserve better, and we can do it.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Marum, and I am running for House District 67, and it is deeply weird to be on this side of the spotlight. So thank you to all those people in the shadows that brought us here together tonight. We envision a legislature that looks to the future, respectfully debates issues, and thoroughly considers how a policy affects diverse groups, making their decisions based on the highest and best good of most, while assigning the fiscal responsibility for implementation fairly and judiciously. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Joe Hancock, and I'm running to represent House District 68, which is Belgrade south of I-90 running toward Gallatin. And the working families of Montana need a partner in government who will help create opportunities by looking past the spastic distractions of the perpetual political circus and focusing on the middle class and small businesses that drive this country.
Hey, I'm Rocky Hamilton. I'm running for House District 69. That's in the Three Forks, Manhattan, Churchill, Spring Hill area. Kind of a big, diverse district. But I am bringing rural common sense solutions to Montana issues.
Wow, those lights are bright. What's up, Gallatin Dems? Let's hear it. All right, my name is Pat Flowers, and I'm your senator for Senate District 32, and I'm running for re-election. And I also want to mention Jim Hamilton couldn't be here tonight. He is stuck in some random airport in the West, and I really regrets not being able to be here. So my vision statement is to let's all of us commit to a Montana where we can live, where we work, a rare thing at this point, where human rights are inviolate, and where we share a complete commitment to abate climate change and conserve our land and our water. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Damian Lynn. I am running for State Senate District 34, which is Belgrade and the surrounding area. My vision statement is that I envision a Montana in which we have a diversified energy sources, we've protected our air and water, and we've improved our infrastructure to support the families that live in Montana. Thank you.
I guess I'm at the tail end here. I just want to thank everyone up on the stage. I am so honored to be running with all of these people. They are really impressive. And please, another hand for all of these people. And when I was asked about my vision statement, it brought me back to when I was a little girl. And I would like to be queen of the universe. I would mandate renewable energy with storage to replace all fossil fuels and install electric vehicle charging stations across the state. Thank you.
And thank you all for running. Thank you all for your visions. Another round of applause. Take a seat. Hearing these visions, receiving them over the past few weeks from the candidates have made me think of all that it is possible for us to create. Also, how much is at stake. So please turn now to another neighbor, even if you have to reach across the way, and share with them what is at stake for you. Thank you. And then I'd like to locate our panel, looking for Chris Pope and Pat Flowers and Mike Weiss and Jennifer Boyer. Ah, there you guys are. So this will be our panel on state and county government. Microphones are all right, to your left. Let's see. Hello, hello, yes. So first, I'd like to introduce sitting state senator Pat Flowers, and Pat does not have to run for election this year. So, sorry, that was a little mind bloop. This is Senator Chris Pope, who does not have to run for election this year. Senator Pat Flowers is running for election this year.
Although I'll trade, right, for sure.
So thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Julia. It's so great to see everyone here tonight. Welcome, and your energy and your presence is going to make a difference after this evening. I can almost guarantee it. My job is to begin a conversation on, very quickly, this is a lightning round. We're going to get to the U.S. candidates debating here. But the idea is to frame where we are in time and space. And to not put a fine point on it, we're in incredibly challenging times. Our democracy is under the kind of testing that we've never seen, certainly in my lifetime. And we're sad and mad and cross-eyed about the state of things and the things that we hold dear. And yet tonight is something also that's reminding us of something that's very positive, namely we have an election coming. And just as it has come for the last 130 years in our Constitution, and we have a slate of enthusiastic candidates who we just saw, and I'm personally proud and excited to be serving with them. Just a few more comments, and then we'll get into this. 150 days remain to the mailing of ballots. And what we do between now and then, as a group, the Gallatin Democrats, is what will make or break getting these wonderful candidates into elected office. So I'm taking a few minutes to help frame the very palpable sense of urgency that we all feel. That's why we're here tonight. For example, we go into these elections with 19 seats in a 50-seat Senate. We go into this election with 33 seats in a 100-seat State House of Representatives, which means we're skinny. And my wife told me not to make a joke because I can't claim to be skinny. But as a legislature, the Dems are very skinny. And to lose a few more seats would put in jeopardy everything that we've worked for, our ability to fend off supermajority attacks on our constitutional rights and other things that we value dearly. We'll get to that in a moment. First, however, I want to talk to and turn to Senator Pat Flowers, who serves 28,000 constituents in a district that starts here at MSU and stretches 90 miles from Belgrade to Big Sky to West Yellowstone. If you can imagine what that kind of task takes, and the diversity of that district. Pat is running again this fall. We're going to help support him. Hats off to Pat, and thanks for your service. Before we get started, Pat, just a broad question. The last session was contentious, but under the Gianforte playbook, is it possible that the coming session could be that much more contentious? And what does your crystal ball tell you?
Thanks, Chris. This is a surprise question, so it's very, very clever of Chris to spring this on me, but no, it's great. I think the coming session is going to be more of the same to a certain degree. I think one of the things we're going to see is the governor put his stamp on the budget, which he really didn't have the opportunity to last time coming into office. So we're going to really find out what his priorities are, and my guess is we may not like his priorities, but I think that's something different. I think the session itself hopefully will be, for us as Democrats, a combination of a little offense and a lot of defense. And I'm hoping that we can play offense on issues like affordable housing. We did pass in the last session a low-income housing tax credit, which will be a great boon for low-income housing development all across the state and especially here. Unfortunately, it was vetoed by the governor. I think his veto is based on something that's surmountable, so hopefully we can get that passed in this next session. Hopefully we can go back and restore inclusionary zoning, which was the tool that we had landed on here in Bozeman for addressing affordable housing. That would be important. I think our good Senator Chris Pope is going to be working on some efforts to lead our transition from fossil fuels into renewables. Also, our hopefully new Senator Denise Heyman will be working on that too. They're both very knowledgeable and skilled on that. On defense, the Republicans in particular, I think it's a copycat exercise when it comes to legislation. So I think, sadly, we're going to see some of the Texas-style, possibly abortion bans or something similar. So I think we all need to be prepared for that, which is going to be a hard discussion, obviously. I think I'm expecting more efforts to weaken public education. I think that is part of the playbook, and I think it's not going to happen in one fell swoop. It's small nibbles, and I think we all, certainly in the legislature, but in general, I think we need to be vigilant about not allowing that to happen and not allowing our great public education to get eroded in any way. I think there's going to be more attacks on voter security, alleged voter security issues that limit, and as a result, limit our opportunities for voting. And probably more attempts to weaken water quality laws, which we saw in this last session. So we're prepared for a lot, and hopefully we can stop all of that. Thanks.
Thanks, Pat, and good luck in your race. We're all pulling for you. I want to switch topics real quick. With someone we all know and appreciate, the Honorable Mike Wheat has served 7-year term in the Montana Supreme Court. Mike, not to steal any of your thunder, but this year marks the 50th anniversary of our state constitution, recognized across the country for its progressive protections of Montanans' privacy, environment, human rights, among many other values. In a sentence or two, that's not going to happen. What are your thoughts on the coming election, the urgency of getting the right people into our state government as it relates to the protection of our dear Constitution?
Thanks, Chris. Before I get into talking about the Constitution, I just want to talk a little bit about what Chris has said and what Pat has said. We're at an inflection point in our country right now and in our state. If we don't win our legislative races here in Gallatin County, we could see the Republicans take over, have a supermajority in the Senate and in the House, and with that, not only can they pass whatever kind of laws they want, they can come in and start amending the Constitution. And all of you here, I'm assuming, have read the Montana Constitution. You understand what a beautiful document it is, and you understand the rights that it extends to all of us. And so let me just plunge into one right, because there's a number of them in there, but it's the right of privacy. And we know what's going on with the United States Supreme Court and their leaked document about what they're going to do with Roe v. Wade, what's going on in states like Oklahoma and Texas and all the other right-wing states. They completely want to do away with the right to abortion completely, absolutely and completely. And they want to subjugate women to old, white-haired guys like me making decisions for your health care needs. But what's important about the right of privacy in Montana is that it's embodied in the Montana Constitution. And in 1999, the Montana Supreme Court handed down Armstrong versus State, which approved the right to abortion for women in the state of Montana. Now, Roe v. Wade is based upon an implied right of privacy in the U.S. Constitution, whereas in Montana, it's explicit. But what's going to happen if the U.S. Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade? And let's be honest, they're going to do it. The court's been loaded by our orange-haired, blowhard president with 3 people who are dedicated to doing away with Roe versus Wade. So let's just accept it as a given fact that it's going to happen. So it's going to throw it back on the states. And the states are then going to have to grapple in the legislature with what are we going to do? And just like Pat said, there's going to be all kinds of legislation passed through this legislature because, I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure we're going to be able to get a majority in the legislature this session. Hopefully in Gallatin County, we can run the table. And if we can run the table in Gallatin County, we can hold this off. But what's going to happen in the legislature is they're going to have all these laws that are passed. It's going to end up in the courts. And this is the important part. Because the Republicans, in 2014, when I ran for re-election on the Montana Supreme Court, at that point in time, it was one of the most expensive races for a house or a seat on the Montana Supreme Court ever. There was millions of dollars spent. And the reason all that money was spent is because it was dark money coming in from out of state. And the reason dark money comes in is because they don't care about your rights. All they want to do is own the institution that's making decisions about your rights. And so this session, we've got one Supreme Court race that's critically important. It's Ingrid Gustafson. She was appointed by Governor Bullock to fill my seat when I retired. And there is a wingnut guy that's running against her. His name's Jim Brown. He's already been endorsed by the governor, by our crazy attorney general, by Rosendale, and by Daines. They all got together and they've endorsed. So all the money is going to come flowing in against Ingrid Gustafson. She needs our help. It's got to be a grassroots campaign. We have to get out, we have to support her, and we have to ensure that she stays on the Supreme Court because they're looking to take it over. Let me just read you a quote. For those of you who might be familiar with the Montana Family Foundation and its CEO, Jeff Laszloffly, here's what he said recently about Roe versus Wade and abortion and that sort of thing. He said, there are two paths to outlaw abortions in Montana. One, amend the Montana Constitution. Now, we just talked about that. If the legislature gets its supermajority, it's going to do that. Two, and this is an exact quote, replace the entire Montana Supreme Court and get it to nullify Armstrong. And we already know that the Attorney General in the state of Montana has said he wants the Supreme Court to overturn Armstrong. So we know what the game plan is. It's just, are we going to respond? Are we going to defend the Montana Constitution and our Montana Supreme Court? And are we going to go out and support the candidates that can help us win this fight? It's as simple as that. Sorry, I probably took too much time.
No, you're right on schedule. And I want to tell you that your passion and dedication to service is fully contagious. And again, thank you for everything. Madam Chair, I hand it back to you.
Thank you. We are going to shift our attention. That was really very powerful to hear from both of you. And I know that I am fully committed to getting our legislators elected this year. Other races that are so critical are our county races. And we have Jennifer Boyer here. I'm thrilled that Jennifer Boyer is running for county commission, and she's an outstanding candidate. And so I asked her to come today to speak with us. She's very knowledgeable already about how everything county government. So I just asked Jennifer to respond to a few things, and my first question was about growth in Gallatin County. So many, when I go out and I knock on doors, people are talking about growth. They're talking about affordability of housing in particular. So,
great, thanks, Julia, and thanks to Pat for. Is it going? Okay. Thanks to Pat, because you mentioned some of the tools that we used to have at the county level to help guide growth. So our counties play a critical role in how our communities grow and develop. And in addition to approving or denying various development proposals, they work closely with our local municipalities to plan for infrastructure development and delivery of those services. In 2021, Gallatin County adopted their new growth policy, which sets a clear framework for how development can occur in the future in a more sustainable manner. The next task at hand is to implement that framework with more detailed standards about how future development is going to be compatible with existing communities as well as our natural environment. Part of the growth policy outlines goals around housing and how we're going to expand a diversity of housing that's available for all of our residents throughout the county.
Thank you. My next question is about mental health services, and Montana has certainly underinvested in mental health, and the current crisis at the state hospital in Warm Springs illustrates that. So what can be done at the county level?
The situation at the state hospital, as well as the closure of Hope House here in Gallatin County, certainly has put a lot of strain on delivering mental health services in our community. What's really exciting, however, is that there's a collaborative effort going on with the hospital, the county government, our municipalities, private entities, and of course, our really important nonprofit partners in this community. They're working on creating a system of services for mental health, so regardless if it's a crisis or management, an adult or youth, we are able to deliver those services effectively here in our own county, so folks can stay here and also have the support of their network and their family to help them in their recovery and management. So I think over the next coming year, we're going to see that system come online and have a more robust response.
Also, we wanted to point out that on the ballot, on the primary ballot right now is
a lot of different...
No, I'm sorry. I wanted to specifically talk about the tax.
I remember. So on the ballot right now, if you turn it over, there is an opportunity to support mental health services by voting yes to tax recreational and or medical marijuana products. So the county is looking to take that tax funding, if it passes, and apply them to mental health services. Thank you.
That's an important vote. I wanted to lift that up, yes. And finally, other county offices, just to point out a couple critical county offices. County attorney, you've met two of the people, and our elections administrator, who is Eric Semerad. Can you speak to both of those?
Sure. So it's really important to look at all the different county departments. They provide critical resources. So our clerk and recorder, Eric's position, is in charge of making sure that our election process is accessible and transparent. And he's doing a great job making sure that everyone has access to convenient polling places. Our county attorney's office is also critically important. They do really important work on the criminal side, but they also interface with a lot of other community concerns such as addiction and mental health. And so there's an opportunity to create a more engaged county attorney's office to be a more active participant in solving those problems.
Thank you. So vote from the bottom of the ballot up. So Chris, finally, you and I have been talking about that we are in this time disappointed, dismayed, often overwhelmed. But you have stepped up tonight to be here, and I want to ask you, what makes you glad to be here tonight supporting the Gallatin Democratic Central Committee?
I would start with just a very broad and almost, it feels like a Hallmark card statement, which is that we have a democracy still. And that's really an important thing to wake up every morning and be aware of that. And I think we have plenty of reasons to have to circle back and think about what that means. Citizen participation is the secret sauce. That's why tonight every one of us in this room needs to give ourselves a little bit of a pat on the back for being active and engaged, and that's what's going to deliver November 8th coming. Will we, in the 150 days we have, look back on the 9th of November and say we were complacent? Montana has a citizen legislature, And meaning that in the old days, folks would lay down their shovels and their rakes and their pitchforks and go to the Capitol and work in the public's good. And that's the citizen legislature is it's not unique in the United States, but we proudly, and sometimes it's difficult because it's once every 2 years. It's also part of the process that the citizen legislature, is driven and fueled by the citizen electorate. All of us, every single day during an election process, have the choice to step forward and put our shoulder to the wheel, and in the ways that each of us decide, to make a contribution to the public effort to make sure that our governments are running properly and in accordance with our deeply held values. So I would just say that tonight is a super important night. Julia is at the head of an organization that statewide is being recognized over the past number of years for its incredible determination and its organizational capability and its fundraising prowess to assemble and organize this Gallatin Valley community, Gallatin County, in ways that other communities want to emulate. And I just can't underscore how important fundamentally that having that organization here, they don't receive a dime from anyone outside of the valley. We don't have a state organization pumping money into our local organization here. The Gallatin Dems are volunteer-based, they're sharp, they're meeting year-round, and they provide direct financial support, as Julia may be able to mention, to our candidates. Not that we all aren't also contributing to our candidates, but all.
I just want to jump on
yes.
something that you said there. Something
sure.
that you said there. And that one of the things we have been focusing on in the past few years in particular is what is considered classic organizing, what organizing means in an old-fashioned sense. And that is to grow the group of engaged people, to not just be talking to those of us in this room even, but to go to the people who are not used to talking about these matters, who haven't been considering how these government policies are going to affect their lives. And so that means getting out, and we had a slide up there a little bit before, knocking doors. It's knocking doors, it's making phone calls, but it's having one-on-one conversations with people. And that has been our big focus. So our first ask tonight is actually engagement, to consider volunteering, to talk to people you know about possibly volunteering, becoming involved in one of the campaigns. Because each campaign actually has the potential in it to build something towards the future, to build a people infrastructure that continues into the future. And that's what we're working on this year. We're working closely with campaigns, the Central Committee, so that when people have gotten engaged in a campaign, there's something that follows through to the next year, to the non-campaign year. So it's keeping these ideas growing in our community. And that does mean democratic presence, but it also means the ideas of what this party stands for.
We have 150 days. And, we complain about democracy being under attack, and it is under attack. And Mike, you showed the path here to what could happen if we're not vigilant and if we're not hardworking in these next 150 days. So one other thought is to go find one of these in the room or out in that part, or maybe there are others being handed out.
We are handing out envelopes, and there are QR codes as well. And if we could pause on this slide. This slide shows that we currently have a very small part-time staff, and it's being entirely funded by our supporting monthly donations. This provides tremendous stability for us. An organization that is focusing on organizing and building out needs the staff. We're a volunteer organization, but we do need that staff to continue to build out. And so that's where your money is going towards. It's about building a Democratic presence in Gallatin County.
Well said.
I'd like to thank you, the panel. Thank you. That was really very powerful. I want to thank our donors, our sponsors for tonight. Thank you so much for making this an event that could be free to the public. And thank you to all our sustaining donors. A special thanks also to Dale Hirsch, who has offered his very lovely vacation rental as our silent auction. So please do, if you have the means, bid on our silent auction item. And with that, we will clear the set. And thank you, panel.
Thank you. Of a livable future and abundant possibility. And we will soon be having our congressional debate as we complete the set change. Screen.
Building enthusiasm.
Now for our headliner event, please welcome again Mike Wheat, the former Montana State Senator and former Supreme Court Justice.
Feels like Comedy Central. Hope I didn't get too carried away in the statement I made before we get started here. I just want to reiterate how important this election cycle is, not just for our local candidates, that's critically important, but for the candidates that you're going to be hearing tonight too. Because these three candidates we're going to be hearing from, one of them is going to be probably running against our infamous Ryan Zinke. And you know what that'll be like if he gets elected to the Congress. So it is an inflection point, and we got to keep that in mind as we go forward. It's going to be a lot of hard work for all of us to be involved, to talk to our neighbors, to get people involved, to make them understand how important this race is. It's not like the good old days. This is really, really critical stuff at this stage of the game. So with that out of the way, what I want to do is I want to introduce the candidates. And I exercised executive privilege in deciding who I was going to bring up first, and I just went alphabetically. So now I want to bring up the candidates. The first one I want to introduce to you is Cora Neumann. Cora. Have you got room there, Cora?
That's the way to go? Okay.
That's it.
Okay.
Cora is a public health specialist. She resides in Bozeman with her husband and 2 teenage children. Now, I'm keeping the introduction and the background real short because you can go to their websites and figure this all out. We want to get right to the questions. Next, I'd like to introduce Monica Tranel. Monica is an attorney. She resides in Missoula with her husband and 3 daughters. Finally, Mr. Tom Winter. Tom is a former state representative who resides in Polson with his dog Gary, and I just found out tonight, his chicken Terry. Before we get started, I want to explain the format that we're going to be operating under for both you and the candidates. Each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to answer each question. There will be no rebuttal. The questions will be alternated. By that I mean, for example, we're going to start out and Cora will be the first one to answer a question, then it will go to Monica, and then it'll go to Tom. And then we'll just keep changing that up every time. And at the end, when all the questioning is done, they'll each have 3 minutes for a closing statement. There's going to be a timer, and she's going to be setting out here. And after 1 minute, she will raise a yellow flag, which means you then have 30 seconds. And once that time has passed, she'll raise a red flag, and then you'll be done. And so we've got a limited amount of time. We've got some, I think, important questions, and I know that these candidates are anxious to speak with you. So without further ado, we'll get into the first question. And like I said, Cora, you will be the first one to answer, and then Monica, and then Tom, okay? This first question is related to the subject of inflation. Republicans relentlessly blame President Biden for inflation, and the president has made inflation his top domestic priority. Inflation impacts the price of housing, food, and fuel, both locally and globally, but it can be a difficult topic to explain and understand. How would you help voters understand inflation and the solutions that you would support to combat inflation? No, is it? Here he comes. It helps when you plug it in. Okay, we can start the timer now.
You got it. Wait. Do you want ours?
I think you can use mine if you'd like,
Yeah, we
Cora.
can swap over.
Okay, now it's on.
Hello.
Got
Okay,
things
now-
started.
Now we're ready. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mike, for the question. Thank you, Gallatin County Dems. Thank you, Bozeman, for being here. Really happy to have this debate here in my hometown. So on the topic of inflation, I think that we all know it and we all feel it. Right now, Montanan families are pulling up to the gas station and the grocery store, and everything is more expensive. We've seen a 7.5 increase in inflation over the last year, which is the highest this country has seen since 1982. So how do we get to the heart of it? Number one, we need to make sure that we bring back more manufacturing to the United States. I was raised in a union household. I've watched how manufacturing and production in our country has deteriorated over my lifetime. That's got to be a top priority. We make sure that we have more American companies and Montana companies employing Montana and American families. Number two, we need to take on price gouging, and that's something that I have experience doing, taking on wealthy special interests that are trying to exploit our public lands and take advantage of the healthcare system. And so we take on price gouging right at the heart, which includes taking on oil and gas, price gouging that we're seeing in the oil and gas industry. But it's not just oil and gas, it's also prescription drug prices, grocery prices. Make sure that we're investing in our agriculture community so that the food that's grown here in America and here in Montana can feed our families locally. So those are a few of the things that we can do to make sure that we're bringing prices down so that Montana families that are already facing so much pain over housing prices and all of the other prices that are rising, they can cover their costs and afford to live.
Monica.
Thank you, Justice Wheat. Thank you, Gallatin Democrats. Julia, thank you so much for all your work. And thank you, everyone, for being here tonight for this really important democratic process. So in the first quarter of this year in 2022, Shell, BP, and Exxon corporations recorded record profits. We are all paying higher prices at the gas pump, and these global corporations are recording record profits. So what is going on here? What we've seen is the pandemic has caused this slinky effect. We froze an economy and then we restarted it. So now we have an economy running hot. The Federal Reserve is addressing that by increasing interest rates, and that agency will do its work. What we can do in Congress to address this is price controls. We've done them before in the United States when we've had a frozen and restarted economy in a very quick moment in time. So we know how those work, we can do them, and that's one really key thing that we have to be looking at, and that's what I will work on. Another thing that we need to look at are tariffs. The tariffs that were imposed under the prior administration, some of them are still hanging out there. They're not working as intended, and so that's another way. And then also imposing higher taxes on the very wealthy is also another lever that we can do to work on that. So those are the areas that I would focus on and the things that we can do in Congress to address inflation. Thank you.
Tom? Thank you, Mr. Wheat. Hello, Bozeman, Gallatin Dems. Thank you. Cora and Monica, it's good to see you guys again. And first off, I just want to say to the candidates that were up here before, I have served in the legislature, I have run campaigns. You don't get all this time on the stage with the nice water, but you deserve it more than we do because we have staff, we get ads, we have people who can help us drive and answer emails. You do the work that actually makes this democracy move in Montana, and so I just want to thank you for that. And then on to the question, of course, of price increases and inflation. As Monica correctly pointed out, especially the oil companies, they are experiencing record profits. There is legislation pending in Congress right now for a windfall tax to make sure that the money that's being charged, I would say unfairly, toward Americans, specifically at the gas pump, will then be kicked back to middle class and working class families through a windfall tax. It has been done before. We can do this again. Now, I would say also, when we're talking about inflation, what we're really speaking about also is inequity and inequality in our economy. And let's talk about the baby formula crisis. And let's talk about how our government, for 40 years, has been unable to rein in the 4 companies that create baby formula. In so doing, they were able to not only raise the price of baby formula, which leads to inflation, but also one of those laboratories that created it is now out of commission. We now have a baby formula crisis during a time when some of the prices to raise a child are the highest possible. We must rein in corporations in general, not just windfall taxes, but ensuring that we break up monopolies on behalf of the people.
All right, our next category question is about energy. Ryan Zinke tweeted recently the question, what happens when the wind runs out? And this was in support of increasing fossil fuel production. Brilliant. Montana lags in renewable energy in terms of both job creation and energy production, impairing our relevance in the regional energy markets. How would you help move Montana into the modern energy market? Monica?
Thank you. So on the question of how we are going to modernize energy, the question of when the wind stops blowing is one that we have to take seriously and address seriously, and we can. We know how to solve this. Modernizing the electric grid is job number 1. And FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, just issued a proposal to do just that. Its proposal doesn't go far enough and accomplish the things we need to get done in this space, but that is one really key step. Montana has fantastic natural renewable resources. We have winter peaking wind, which can serve load on the West Coast. We need to be able to get it there. Transmission is job number 1. Other things we can do in fossil fuel subsidies, we can charge full freight for anybody who uses our public lands. And EV charging stations, Representative Heyman, 100% with you on that. Changing the psychology of how we think about how we use transport, getting it to be, I'm going to fill up. And guess what? Let's make it free so we don't have that inflation problem anymore. We can do that. And shout out to Bozeman and Helena and Missoula. The cities have actually, across the country, been leading the way in reducing our reliance on fossil fuels. And so that's a really important thing that we can also do. I look forward to partnering with you. This is my area of expertise. I've been doing this for 25 years on the ground here in Montana, working with landowners. Drive to Billings, look north at Reed Point, you'll see a wind farm. I helped get that built. Wind turbine in Broadview, that was my clients. Thank you.
Tom? Hello? Go ahead, Tom.
Is this on? Now it is. Hello, I'm back. Well, let's just consider the source and the buffoon saying what happens when the wind doesn't blow. We're talking about Ryan Zinke here. And when we're talking about climate change, and when we're talking about fairness, when we're talking about the oil companies, what we're talking about is corruption. He went from $2 million in his bank account to possibly $32 million during his time in public service. Where do we think that that money came from? Where do we think, what does he do all day when he's living in California and claiming to live in Whitefish? Where does he get the money for that truck that costs $120 to fill up? It comes from the oil companies. He works for them. So what we're responding to on this stage is not the words of actually a strong political candidate. We're hearing from a shill. And what we need to do to fix this is to get corruption out of our government. Now, specifically to his ridiculous question of what happens when the wind doesn't blow, which we know is just meant to get him on Fox News, we build transmission lines. We harness, as Monica rightly said, we harness the abundant wind energy, especially on the Rocky Mountain front, for a new era of Montana industrialization and resource exploitation. We do not have to become Butte, a place that everyone loves, but of course suffered awful environmental reactions to the work that was done over the last 100 years to pull copper out of the ground. What we can do is enrich our communities, and even our rural communities, in providing power, clean power, to expensive West Coast markets. We can sell it, but what we cannot do is rely on a government at this point, won by industry shills who will not let us put the money toward putting transmission lines to the West Coast. And I would like to change that.
Cora?
Thank you for that question. I do have to agree that I agree with Ryan Zinke on one thing. I do think that we need to increase domestic energy production in the United States. The conflict in the Ukraine has been a stark reminder of how important it is that we have more energy production here on our soil, but we can do this in a way where I don't agree with him is on how and why. When I think about energy production and the future of our planet, I'm thinking about my children and future generations and how we pass on a livable planet. He's thinking about personal gain, as Tom mentioned, the profits that he has garnered by selling off our public lands and then turning around and consulting for the oil and gas companies that he sold them to, or that he lifted protections for. So number one, yes, we need to increase energy production in this country, and it goes back to the problems of inflation and affordability for our American and Montanan families. Montana has a history of being a top energy producer in this country. 60% of our energy is currently renewable. We can do better. We're the 6th highest hydropower producing state in the country. Montana is a home of technology when it comes, and innovation when it comes to producing producing electricity, I see. But what we have to do to make sure it's a success in this state is bring all of the stakeholders to the table. I've been meeting with energy company executives, union leaders, electricity and energy co-ops, and climate leaders. We need to be able to bring players who haven't necessarily always worked together to the table and find a way forward. We can bring new energy to Montana, but we have to make sure that these companies are bringing jobs, are supporting unions, and are making sure that our communities benefit from the growth.
All right, our next question has to do with mental health, something that we talked about a little earlier in the program. We all know someone personally who is grappling with mental health, and Gallatin County has long needed adequate mental health care. Montana has tragically high suicide rates, among the worst in the nation. But sadly, we're 39th among the states for providing access to mental health services. To that point, the mental health treatment facility at Warm Springs has lost its federal Medicare, Medicaid funding due to unsafe conditions. Federal funding will be one of your most important tools to solve problems for Montanans. How would you use federal funding or other tools to support mental health care in Montana? Tom?
By instituting Medicare for all. A system, a for-profit system, a for-profit healthcare system, its job is to make sure you and your community get the least possible healthcare for the dollar they would spend. They are profit-seeking businesses, insurance companies. They are profit-seeking businesses, many hospitals. We have this question of how do we do this? What are we doing? Our outcomes for suicide, but also for maternal mortality, are in the middle or lower part of industrialized nations. We are the wealthiest country on earth, and we ration care for the poor. This question was specifically about mental health care. And I will tell you that when I worked in the State House in the relevant committee on these issues, this was when we were number 1 for suicide, and I believe number 2 for teenage suicide. I've recently experienced a suicide in my own family. The devastation that this causes is not just singular. It reverberates through communities. It especially reverberates through our Native communities, our Native sisters and brothers. One of the reservations recently in the last 2 years when I was campaigning had to declare a state of emergency due to a spate of suicides. And our response is what? Cutting around the edges? We're going to negotiate prescription drug prices? Your community, unless it's a really wealthy community, will never get the health care it needs. Montana will never get the health care it deserves unless we move away from a for-profit system that puts psychiatrists and practitioners where the wealthy people are and keeps them away from the places where they're most needed, like our communities. So healthcare for all now. There is no other moral answer to this question.
Cora?
Thank you. So raise your hand if you have kids at home. Raise your hand if you're under 30. So we are facing in this country a historic mental health crisis among young people. The U.S. Surgeon General just released a red flag warning, which is very rare, about the state of mental health of our young people. And here in Montana, that's on top of the suicide rates and the mental health rates that Justice we mentioned before. We have been in the top 5 historically for suicide rates, and there are ways that we can address this both nationally and locally. And I want to thank all of our local legislators for the work that you have done to make sure that we have parity for mental health, and that's something that I will push for from Congress. We also have expanded telehealth here. My work has been for almost 25 years with rural communities, increasing access to healthcare, and mental health is always at the center. I was recently awarded the Montana Public Health Association Award for exemplary service. And part of the reason that I received that award, the organization shared with me, was because I highlighted and brought mental health forward from day one in this crisis. Mental health is public health. We need to make sure, so mental health parity, increasing telehealth services, making sure that services for farmers and ranchers, veterans, and tribal communities where some of the highest suicide rates exist are increased. And there are federal programs through SAMHSA and NIH that would be one of the first priority issues I would bring to Congress to make sure that our families and communities can be healthy.
Thank you, Justice Wheat. How will federal funding help with mental health issues that we're seeing in our communities? Passing the Mental Health Parity Act, making sure that Medicare and Medicaid are funding mental health services, and making sure that we have mental health services available in our schools, which right now are at risk of being lost due to our state superintendent. So that's something we need to fight back against. In terms of what we're seeing with Warm Springs closing down, Hope House losing its services, I would look to some of the models that we've seen with Bridger Care, partnering directly with the federal government to get the Title X resources in the community. So as your representative in Congress, one of the things that I can do is be very connected to the communities and make sure where the needs are and where the resources are getting matched together. So we do see a lot of resources available, but getting those deployed in the communities where they're needed is another step. And so sometimes that's just a matter of figuring out what the red tape is, what is the clog point in the pipeline. And I can help do that by knowing our communities, serving our communities, and being there. So I think we need to have services available, providers available in the communities. Telehealth does work, but people also need to have direct access to providers where they are in their communities. And treating people in their communities, I think, is a really good first step. So making sure those services are being deployed where the needs are seen in our communities. Thank you.
Okay, sticking in this vein of healthcare, our next category has to do with prescription drugs. Recent polls have found 80 to 90% of Americans favor the federal government negotiating lower prescription drug prices for both Medicare and private insurance companies. Try as they might, Congress has been unable to develop a solution to this problem. In fact, Representative Rosendale recently voted against a bill to substantially reduce the cost of insulin. Can you assure Montanans that you will fight for Congress to lower the cost of prescription drugs? And can you explain how you will win this fight? Cora?
Thank you for that question. The reason that I work in rural healthcare is because of the challenges my family faced accessing the care they needed. We lost my father to a lumber mill accident when I was a baby, and if we had been closer to good care, he may have survived. And so my work is always focused on making sure that just because you live in a rural community doesn't mean that you should have lower quality services or fewer opportunities. And that has been what I've committed to my career to, and will bring that expertise to Congress. Without question, we have to be able to negotiate with pharmaceutical companies, and I have dealt with this throughout my career, making sure that critical life-saving drugs are available to rural communities and technologies. We could save $80 billion over the next 10 years if we allowed the US government to negotiate on drug prices. We can also find ways to cap things like insulin prices and look at the cost, out-of-pocket cost for Medicare Part D for senior citizens. Not only do Montanans across the state have to drive sometimes up to 5 hours to find the care they need. So thinking about gas and the added price and cost of finding and accessing the care you need, but then the out-of-pocket prices. 25% of Montanan adults forego either medications or a medical procedure because they can't afford it. So without question, this is something that we can continue to push through Congress, the ability to negotiate prescription drug prices, and on top of that, make sure that healthcare is more accessible for communities, especially across rural communities across the United States.
Monica?
To the specific question of can I assure you that I will stand up to the corporate monopolies who are profiting not only off of our pain, but off of addiction, look at my record. That is what I've spent my career here in Montana doing as a trial lawyer. And this moment needs to be met, and I have the skills to do it, as shown by what I've done standing up to corporate monopolies and winning. And I can give you cites to cases. So I can assure you I will do it. I've done it, and I will walk into this job on day one with a skill set to do what's necessary to stand up to these people who are profiting from pain, from addiction, and that's wrong. What can we do specifically to address prescription drug prices? We can ensure that Medicare is negotiating for prescription drugs. If we like competition, let's have a little competition, right? So what are other things we can do? Look at who's making these drugs and how they're profiting off of them. Why should a family that has profited billions and billions and billions of dollars off of addiction drugs all of a sudden say, we don't have any money? Gee, go look at our umbrella corporation, and we're broke, all out here. No, that's not acceptable, and I will stand up and fight for that for you. I'm proud to be endorsed by Governor Schweitzer, for whom this was a signature issue, and I will carry that torch, and I will represent Montana as he did. Thank you.
Tom?
I'm restating the question, actually, just so I can, and the audience can hear it again here.
You want me to read it again?
If you don't mind. I heard it was about prescription drugs, and I don't just want to say, hey, we shouldn't actually make people pay for drugs they can't afford. They should just give them.
Okay, I'll read it again for you. Recent polls have found 80 to 90% of Americans favor the federal government negotiating lower prescription drug prices for both Medicare and private insurance companies. Try as they might, Congress has been unable to develop a solution to this problem. In fact, Representative Rosendale recently voted against a bill to substantially reduce the cost of insulin. Question: can you assure Montanans that you will fight for Congress to lower the cost of prescription drugs, and can you explain how you will win this fight?
Absolutely, and thank you for restating it. I think it's important to hear the numbers, the raw percentages, and the overwhelming percentage of Americans who believe we should be able to afford medication. But also, 71% of Americans believe that we should have single payer, which would eliminate this question entirely. You should not have drugs rationed for you and your family based on your ability to pay, and that is what we do. And I know I said this before, and I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it is not a Montana value to ration life-saving medication for our poorer neighbors, for our native neighbors, for our younger neighbors, and for our struggling neighbors, if it's not yourself and your family. I have run on this issue before. I have run on the concept that we should not be rationing life-saving medication before. In a Trump district, I ran making sure that Medicaid expansion would stay. And thank God, due to this work of so many people who knew so much more than me in the legislature, we were able to keep Medicaid expansion 4 years ago. But I can tell you right now, from my time on the doors, from my time in communities in Polson, where I live, to Whitefish, to Missoula, to the reservation, to here, to Twin Bridges, where I was a week ago, you will find that even the community of Twin Bridges supports the idea of stopping the rationing of healthcare. So yes, do I support direct importation of drugs from Canada to break the back of Big Pharma? Yes. Do I support the ability of the federal government to negotiate drug prices with Big Pharma if we can't get single payer? Yes. But voters must know we are there for them, and we believe that this unjust system is not a Montana value or an American one.
Okay, we're going to move on now to an area that for the folks in the audience who have children will be familiar with this. It's the child tax credit. The child tax credit returns dollars to working families based on their income and number of children. During the pandemic, as part of President Biden's American Rescue Plan, the child tax credit was temporarily increased and made more accessible for working families. The president now wants to make these increases and expansions permanent. What are your plans to show working Montana families? Well, thank you very much. Actually, I was trying to keep the shadow out of my reading. What are your plans to show working Montana families that you will be their champion in Congress, and how would you propose to fund the expanded benefits? Monica?
The child tax credit was a really great example of how we can lift families out of poverty immediately. And as we are being attacked on these inflation fronts, this is something that has not been reinstated and should be, and I will work to do that. Across this district, I've had conversations with families who've benefited from this child tax credit. And you know what? They had no idea what administration or what party was responsible for delivering this to them. And so those are the kinds of conversations we have to be able to do. But one of the things that's really essential is making sure that these resources are usable. So the child tax credit started out as so complex because they wanted to require that you had filed an income tax return in order to be able to get it. Well, lo and behold, a lot of families that need it hadn't filed income tax returns. And so they needed to have another way to access these resources. Same thing with the SNAP benefit program, 17-page application. We need to simplify that process. We need to figure out how to get the resources that are available into the communities where they are needed. So simplifying that, identifying them, and knowing the communities and being able to serve them, which I bring to this job. I know Montana, I can serve Montana, and I've talked to families across the district who specifically benefited from this, so I know what this looks like on the ground, and I will work to keep implementing it. Thank you.
Tom? Thank you. The child tax credit has halved child poverty in America, but now it's doubled because it's gone. And that was the work of Joe Manchin and our favorite other political party, the GOP, working in concert to harm working families. We will all, of course, on this stage, do everything we can once one of us is in office to get the CTC back. But Mike also asked the question of what we do for working families as well. It should not be so easy to have child poverty. It's because our policies don't work for people in poverty. There are so many people struggling at this point, so many people struggling, especially of color, especially in rural areas, especially single-parent households. Those are the people who've been left behind for the last 40 years. If you look on our campaign website, if you look at my work in the State House, if you look at my work now, you will know that we fight explicitly for working families. Not only am I in a union, but I want to be there to make sure that people can unionize more, so that we can get more people part of an organization that fights for their rights against corporate greed that the government can't protect them from or won't. Our campaign also does everything we can to ensure that we are accessible to working people, that we show that this can be done. I'm a working person myself, that we show that this is something you can do for your family. We want to make sure that on the doors, that we empower people to know not only that you can vote for me, but you yourself can go to campaign meetings. You yourself can go to city council meetings. You can be a part of this. But in the further sense, and I do see that red flag, I'm sorry, I just want to say we need to decrease taxes on working people. It is ridiculous that billionaires pay a 2% tax rate and I pay a 20%. It's not fair. It's not American. And that fairness is a Montana value as well that I know we can win elections on, going against proto-oligarchs like Ryan Zinke.
Cora.
I agree with both Monica and Tom. I absolutely believe that we need to extend the child care tax credit. And this is not just about bringing children out of poverty. This is actually helping working families, making sure that they have the tools that they need to cover the expenses of their families. 40% of Montana businesses reported access to childcare as a secondary challenge to finding a workforce and that can make sure that our businesses here can thrive. So extending the child care tax credit not only so that families can put food on the table, but so that our businesses can succeed. I also support ending the 2017 Republican tax credits on the top 1%. Corporations and billionaires are seeing 83% of the benefits of those tax cuts, while our working families here are seeing increases in prices and housing like we have never seen, certainly in my lifetime. We are seeing a crisis with housing, with health care, and with prices, allowing our families to cover the expenses that they need so that they can thrive. When we moved here when I was an infant, my mom was a young widow. And if the prices, the housing prices and the price of the everyday prices of groceries were the level that they are now, our family could not have made it through. In Montana, we come together as a community to help build each other up. And central to making sure that our communities here can thrive is lowering prices, which includes federal programs like increasing and extending the tax credit, but also making sure that the billionaires that have benefited from those tax cuts, that we end those giveaways to the top 1%.
Okay, our next area of inquiry here has to do with education funding. Access to high-quality public education is the bedrock for opportunity and equality in our country. The National Financial Aid Program has afforded many the opportunity to attend college, but many students are still left saddled with debt. With the student loan interest moratorium coming to an end in August, how will you respond to the financial burden that students and families have to face when making decisions about economics and education? Tom?
Student debt is a generational tax on the young, put forth by wealthy and often power for older interests. We know this. So I was a Warren fan in my last campaign, I would say. Some of you here, maybe. You don't have to all be. You can still vote for me. But one of the things she says often is that it cost her to get her bachelor's degree $50 a semester in Oklahoma. Adjusted for inflation, that might be $500. Makes no difference. We know what we're seeing here. The minute that our higher education system was opened more to women, to people of color, to the poor, to rural people, is the minute that it became something that the federal government and state governments refused to support. So they have put the burden of paying for education on the people who are getting it, rather than making generational investments in youth. I support ending and canceling student debt and reforming the system that makes it so that someone graduates from college with a mortgage before they can buy a house. We're in Bozeman, and so we're going to talk a lot about how expensive it is to buy a house in the first place. It makes absolutely no difference whether your house is $100,000 or $2 million if you have $200,000 of student debt to even start your life. Why do we think my generation is having children later? Why do we think we have lower goals, lower attainment in terms of the wealth we can create? Why do we think we can't get involved in public service? Because 50% of us are saddled with hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt we did not deserve. It is not fair, it is not right. In the legislature, I wrote a bill to cancel student debt for people who went to Montana universities. What the government found is that increased tax revenue because they stayed, because they built jobs, families, houses, businesses. I want to make sure that we cancel student debt and change higher education funding so that it helps people who struggle.
Cora?
Me? So first of all, I just want to say and recognize that not everybody needs to go to college. Neither my mom or stepdad graduated high school. My dad was a journeyman carpenter, and we had a really good life. And so one of the things that I want to say right off the bat is that I want to make sure, and I am committed to making sure, that young people interested in every trade and every profession have access to programs where they can thrive and where they can raise a family. Apprenticeship programs in the unions is you get to earn while you learn. And there are incredible programs across the state that I would seek to continue to support. So supporting trade schools and apprenticeships, making community college free here in Montana. We can absolutely do that. We're really, really close. So making sure that that's something that's very accessible for all students here in this state. Debt forgiveness for those in public service. I think it's absolutely critical that those, one of my pillars that I hope to push forward from Congress is making sure that our teachers and our nurses and those in public service across our state can afford to live here. We need to recruit and retain health workers, mental health workers, teachers, and at a cornerstone of making sure that can happen is debt forgiveness and housing assistance. So number one, we need to make sure that we have accessible, that having a job and living here in Montana is accessible for those who've completed a college degree. And then increasing Pell Grants, making sure that college is accessible and that there is more federal funding for those who need it. So I support all of those programs. We need to make sure that we increase enrollment in the trades because we have a lot of shit to build. Sorry. We have this infrastructure bill coming in and we have a lot to build. And I'm from a family of builders, so let's get to work.
Monica.
So the specific question of will I support student debt relief? I would support targeted relief, making sure that it's going to people and communities, families that need it. So we're helping our working class families live in the communities where they work. Teachers should be able to live in Bozeman. So I support targeted relief that's delivering our resources, our people, into their communities. But let's look at the front end of this problem. And let's celebrate 150 years ago, President Lincoln signed the Morrill Act, creating our land grant colleges. Same year Montana became a territory, MSU. Right? And so for about 120 years, we had really low cost higher education in Montana. And we were serving agriculture and mechanical degrees for people who would go into Montana and deliver needed services across our communities. What happened to that? We have intentionally followed policies to increase the cost of college, so making it a consumer profit-oriented notion, and we need to change that back. These are policies that we can change back. We can make it. Gallatin College is one of the fastest growing community colleges in the state. Bitterroot Valley College was passed, but it's not funded. And Northern in Havre is an awesome community college delivering kids, adults into their communities who are working well there. So funding all of those is a priority for me. Thank you.
Okay, next we're going to move into a category here that's near and dear to your hearts, campaign finance. Elections have become expensive endeavors, as we all know. During Montana's last congressional election, each candidate raised several $1 million. Today's campaigns are also flooded with out-of-state money, super PACs, and corporate donors. How do you plan to raise enough money to be competitive, yet not sell out to corporate interests? We start with you, Monica.
So far in this campaign, I've raised money. 80% of my campaign money comes from you. The people of Montana are supporting me and sending me to Congress. Thank you. But it's an issue. Campaign finance reform needs to happen. In 2011, our state legislature passed a ballot initiative that was on our ballot in 2012. 75% of Montanans voted to support overturning Citizens United. And our congressional delegation is obligated to pass legislation, or at least introduce it, at the federal level. Senator Tester has done that, and I will do that on the congressional side. We need campaign finance reform. But first of all, we have to get there so we can actually be voting on these issues, right? So we have to raise money so that we can reach voters and that we can get out our message. And I think that what's really important in going up against Ryan Zinke is understanding that reaching our communities, reaching our voters requires what those panels here, what Julia and Justice Wheat were talking about. Democracy is an action word. And so we can raise money to put ads on air and blah, blah, blah about candidates. What we need is you knocking on doors. We need to be in our communities. We need to be connecting with voters. Democracy is an action word. It is not a default form of government. We have to fight for it. We have to own it. And we can do that, but it takes work and it takes commitment, and we can all do it, but we have to do it together. I need you. With your help, we will win 2 races. Thank you.
Tom. Campaign finance reform is an issue near and dear to my heart, not because I just care about anti-corruption efforts, but because I hate asking billionaires and millionaires for money. It's not fun. And they usually don't want to give me money, because I want to take their money and give it to you. You laugh now, but wait till you're in a drawing room in San Francisco and they look at you like, dude, we're not going to help you. I will tell you, though, that Montana has some of the best campaign finance law in the country for a reason. We hate corruption. We do believe that politics can be bought. That is why we put a price tag on it that is low. That is why we make it so originally, before the State House did it, you could only put $180 into a state legislative campaign. I won a campaign in a Trump district, plus 11 points for Trump, held by the GOP Speaker of the House's son, on the strength of $180 donations. We made nothing. What it took was shoe leather. What it took was arguing for the values that I know were a part of our community. So Justice Wheat asked about how do we get rid of campaign finance? How do we fix campaign finance reform? I think that was part of the question. One, you elect people, hopefully like me, who know the value of that, who have won elections where we had no money in the first place and saw that that was a clean way to campaign. But also, I think we all need to remember, look at the people who have the most money. Look at people like Ryan Zinke. He'll talk about the wind. He talks about nothing. The candidates that have the most money are usually the people who have the least to stay for a reason, because they have more people to serve who are wealthy and have oxes who could be gored. Remember that every time you look at a politician. Please think about where their money comes from that gets you in front of you, and think about what they're saying and what they're not saying. And to the issue of raising money in the general, I will tell you that all of us will be starting at square one at the end of this primary. And we will find the money, all of us, I guarantee, because we can rally the state and the nation around the values of Montana.
Cora.
So it's a great question, and I agree. In Montana, we believe that we need to get money out of politics, and we've proven that at the national stage. In 2020, in this last cycle, there was $1 billion in undisclosed funding in our elections. What this shows is the undue influence that the ultra-wealthy and corporations have on our elections. It must end. We must end Citizens United, and I am fully committed to that. Non-negotiable. In terms of money in this race, I'm really proud of my campaign and how well we have performed, and we might talk about that a little bit more later. 93% of my donations are $100 or less. My Montana money is on par with the other candidates, but we need to raise a lot to win this race. That said, I do not take corporate PAC money. I will not allow a super PAC to engage on my behalf in the primary. We need to pull together as Democrats in Montana, because as Democrats, we are committed to getting rid of dirty politics, to getting rid of money in politics. This is a team sport, and when I'm in Congress, I will be serving all of you, no corporate special interests.
Well, believe it or not, we're to the last question. And this has to do with election strategy. You were all candidates in 2020. What lessons did you learn from that election? And how are those lessons informing your strategy to earn more votes than your Republican opponent in this election? Cora, we start with you.
Okay, well, what I learned in my Senate race before Governor Bullock got in was absolutely that being a Democrat right now in this country and in this state is a team sport. I look forward to fully supporting whoever comes out of this primary. I will put my full weight behind whoever wins. I have committed to not going negative, and I will not go negative, number one. Number two, when it comes to beating Zinke, the person who can beat Ryan Zinke in November is the person who has already beat him. I have beat Ryan Zinke on public lands, helping to restore Bears Ears National Monument, a huge monument, national monument that he slashed when he was head of Interior. And I did that by bringing together a grassroots coalition of farmers and ranchers, tribal leaders, business owners, and local leaders who know how to take care of our lands. And that's how we do things in Montana. We work across all sectors and people from all backgrounds to come together and build a grassroots campaign or a grassroots movement that can win. Number two, I am keeping pace with Ryan Zinke on fundraising. Why? Because that's how you win. We have almost as much money in the bank as him, and we will continue one donation at a time to make sure we have what it takes to build a campaign that can win. So I have beat Ryan Zinke once. We are keeping pace with him in building a really strong operation. We have the support of elected leaders or former elected leaders like Mike Cooney. We have Casey Schreiner, Kim Abbott, tribal leaders, union leaders, agriculture leaders, hunters and anglers. We have the breadth and the depth of support that money can't buy.
Monica.
Thank you, Justice Wheat. I was on the ballot in the general election in 2020, and I outperformed every Democrat in Montana. I did that by running in 7 of the 16 counties that make up this congressional district. We can win this district. Senator Tester would have won it in 2018 by 10 points, and he had 41,000 votes in Missoula County, which is the heart of this district. In 2020, I had 43,000 votes for a down-ballot utility commission race. So the way to win, the path to victory is knowing and connecting with our voters. And a lesson that I learned in the election in 2020 was you have to connect with people where they are. The mayor of Troy, I called him right before the election, and he said, I cast my ballot. You're the only Democrat I voted for. I had that story happen up and down that district. So one of the things I learned is to start the process early of connecting with the people we need to win this race. We know after the 2020 election, the path to victory in Montana requires energizing our base. We need all of you, and we need all of you to go get 10 more people to vote. And we also need persuadable voters. So we've got to appeal to independents and moderate Republicans, and I have a proven track record of doing that. And we also need to start early. I am the only candidate who has ads out directly calling out Ryan Zinke for his corruption and directly calling him out for his bad votes on abortion. So I am challenging him now. And as a 2-time Olympian, I have represented our country at the highest level of international competition, and nobody takes the flag and makes it a partisan issue. I will represent on that. Thank you.
Tom. Thank you for the question. So what do we learn about our elections? I've been into, right now, I lose primary elections, I win the general. That's always my problem. So if y'all could give me some hands here. It's tough. So, yeah, you'll never find a progressive Democrat going like, yeah, give me more Republicans to talk to. Except for me. So the thing is, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, like I was mentioning. I have won a district that voted for President Trump plus 11 points. I've already done this. I know that it's not hard. Well, no, it's incredibly difficult. You have to go to every door. You have to look at organizing your campaigns and your politics like we looked at community organizing during the pandemic, like we looked at mutual aid. We need to rely on the resilience of our communities in the face of what's happening to us, not just at the state level, but at the federal level, to ensure that we can build on that. I won an election by doing those things in a district that was smaller, but was part of the district. and it was more Trumpy, more Republican than this one. I can tell you that the one way we can also win elections is by giving the voters what they want. You will not find me dealing with the same boring national Democratic lines. I am a Democrat through and through, but I'm a Montanan first. I know that you want universal health care because the polls are there. I know that you believe in a right to an abortion because it's in our Constitution. I know that you believe in the dignity of your own communities because you fight for them when you try and elect people like me and others to our legislature. We're going to give it to them unvarnished. Show them that there actually is not the divide that other people want to be there, and that Ryan Zinke is not representative of the dignity and values we seek for our communities. That is how you win elections here. That is how I have won an election already, and hopefully I'll get the chance to do it again with your help.
Okay, so before we move into the closing statements by these wonderful candidates, I just want to say it's been a pleasure to be on the stage with these very qualified and wonderful candidates. I appreciate the fact we should all be proud that we have people like this who are willing to throw themselves into the fire of a campaign on our behalf. And I'd like all of us to give them a warm round of applause before they give their closing statements. All right, for your closing statement, and we'll start with Tom, why are you the best candidate to win this race?
I am here before all of you, and the only reason I feel qualified to be on this stage is because I have won an election. Alone amongst the people on this stage, I have won an election for the Democrats. I have brought together our community, along with the help of union organizers, along with the help of conservation leaders, along with the help of community members and what people that became my constituents. We were able to win a race in a time when most people thought it was impossible. We were the only Democratic flip in the last, I believe, 6 years, or at least during the Trump era, and it was in a district, again, that had voted for Trump plus 11 points. I have been punched in the mouth with my teeth going through my lips by a constituent going door to door, trying to get these things done for our community, and I still look just fine. Here I am, guys. The thing is, we are now running for a congressional race. When I was in the legislature, and much to my surprise, I got there, and I ran on unabashed Montana, progressive, democratic values as embodied by our Constitution, as embodied by the people in this room. I wrote 24 bills to advance the interest of my constituents. These were things like taxing rich people's second homes to zero out taxes on the middle class homes and working class homes, people who couldn't pay their taxes, to end student debt in a way that was actually feasible with our own economy and with our state budget, to ensure that we had clean and healthful environment, to legalize weed, which is because it's what people wanted. And thank you for doing that, by the way, afterwards. I will tell you that in doing so, we were able to pass 4 bills but bring these things to the table, to show people what it was possible when you were a true citizen-led government. The bills that I wrote weren't the things I was interested in. I didn't particularly care about marijuana, but I did care about criminal justice reform. I did care that you had 2 times more chance of being arrested if you had weed in your car if you were Native, and 10 times if you were black. I did believe and do believe that public service, that community organizing in the face of and for politics can bring about good outcomes. So, and I'll end quickly. So in our campaign, what we're doing in the federal race is we ask you, what do you think you deserve as a Montanan, as an American? Do you think you deserve to have dentures if you can't afford them in your old age? Do you think you deserve the right to an abortion? Do you think if you're a Native woman, do you think you deserve to earn the same amount per hour as I do, a white man? Do you believe we should have concerted climate action? Do you believe that you should get health care whether or not you are poor? You do. I know you do. And I do as well. And our campaign works to bring the dignity that you are fighting for every day in your community and your family to Congress. And we hope we can earn your vote.
Monica.
Thank Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight, Gallatin County Dems. Thank you for hosting this. The stakes are incredibly high right now. We saw the Dobbs leak decision a couple of weeks ago, and we know what that means for so many of us, for women, for families, for all of us who want to have control over how we use our time and treasure. The stakes are incredibly high. And seeing the shadow dockets of the Supreme Court. So that's the Article 3 branch of government. The Article 2 branch of government, the executive branch, is also having lots of challenges. We need a functional, operative Article 1 legislature. We need people who can walk into that body and deliver based on the ground of the district that they represent, based on their skills and their resources. This congressional seat gives us hope because it gives us a choice. We can do what you all did here a couple of weeks ago with your school board elections. You mobilized, you got into action, and you did democracy on the ground. And you got the results that you needed with your school board. And so we know how to do this. This is a question of getting to work. So why am I the best candidate to win this race against Ryan Zinke is the question that's asked. I have been in all 16 counties. Did we have 1 minute or 3? Oh, sorry. So I've been out there meeting with people. I'm connecting with them. I grew up on a ranch in eastern Montana with my 9 brothers and sisters. I have been in Eureka. I showed up there, and they said, "You're the first congressional candidate who's ever come here." I went to Dupuyur. They said, "There's been no Democrat candidate ever come here." And I've had Republicans come up to me and say, "I saw your ad against Zinke. You've got my vote." And this is real. The stakes are so high. Please, I know you're all here because you want to win, and we can win, but we have to have the right candidate, and I would love to have your support in this race. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for doing democracy. Thank you.
Cora.
Thank you all for coming, and I would be remiss if I didn't say that Gallatin County, you are the key to us winning this seat. We are growing so fast, and we are trending blue. My hometown, I love it. Okay, so I'm not a politician, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a millionaire. I have dedicated my 25-year career to making sure that rural families don't have to face the tragedies and hardships that my family faced. I come from a long line of survivors and of fighters. They're sitting right here tonight. We are at a turning point here in Montana. We are growing so quickly, and it is presenting incredible, heartbreaking challenges, but it's also creating opportunities. This is our chance to send someone to Washington who not only has a personal understanding of what Montana families are facing, but has over 20 years of experience in delivering for rural communities, making sure that just because you're in a rural community doesn't mean that you don't get access to the same kind of care and opportunities that the rest of the country does. This is our opportunity to send someone to Washington who understands the pain of losing someone due to lack of access to good care. Someone who understands what it's like to be pushed out of your hometown for economic reasons. That happened to my family, and it was heartbreaking. Someone who has a track record of protecting our public lands, not selling them off to the highest bidder. And someone who is a lifelong Democrat, but has always worked together with Democrats and Republicans to get things done for our community. I am so proud of the strength of our campaign. We work our asses off. And we're doing it because there's no way that I'm letting Ryan Zinke be in charge of my children and your children's futures. We have sent him to Washington once. He has failed us. Not again. Not on my watch. So again, I've beat him once. Together we can beat him again. Thank you again to the Gallatin County Dems, my hometown. We're so happy to have you here tonight. Let's win!
All right, let's hear it again for our candidates.
Question?
Yes.
Did you guys go over voting? Does everybody, did you broadcast broadly the new voting? Right, I mean, you have to register within 24 hours and the way that the laws are now being.
Oh,
Have you?
We weren't going to do it tonight, but I don't know. Have they?
Just want to make sure that it's blasted really, really loud and clear. You have to register to vote by noon on June 6th. So spread the word a day before election. So you have to register by noon on the 6th. And you have to make sure that you get your ballot to the courthouse, to the elections office by 8 o'clock on June 7th. And if you are a student, you can't just have your student ID. You have to have your student ID and another piece of identification. I just feel like we need to blast that a lot.
And another thing on that point, if we're talking about that, 58,000 ballots were mailed out in Gallatin County, 72,000 registered voters. If you didn't receive a ballot in the mail, it's because they've reverted to 2018, so it's not an automatic mail out. If you haven't opted into getting your ballots, you have to make sure that you're asking them for it. And the Supreme Court decision actually didn't address the ballot collection piece of it, so those can be collected. For good information about it, Forward Montana has a great website, and go on the Secretary of State's website as well. Thank you.
I guess that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all again for coming tonight. I thought it was very educational.